Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for making it to our session. I know the first session of the second day of the conference, we're all starting to slow down a little bit, so we appreciate you making it here. So our session is called From Concept to Concrete, Teaching Law Students About AI. And essentially what we want to talk about is we work together as part of our law practice technology class to provide what we think was a pretty good instructional session for law students about AI. So just a little bit about ourselves. My name is Jesse Bowman. I see some familiar faces here that I've met before, but if I haven't met you, I'm a reference librarian at Northwestern. My actual title is Associate Law Librarian for Technology Initiatives and Instruction. So I do kind of a mixture of legal research reference and instruction work, but then also I teach a law practice technology class and try and help out with some of the different educational technology initiatives at the law school. Stefan?
I'm Stefan Martone. I'm in the Information Technology Department at Northwestern University. I've been collaborating with Jesse so I just completed my MS-ED at Purdue, and I was working with Jesse before I got started with that. And at the time when I started my degree, I realized there was something called maker education, which is a hands-on, building things, collaborating, multidisciplinary way to learn, and learn in a way that you can present what you learned in a way that you're passionate about. So when I started my degree and found Maker Faire, Maker Education, I immediately combined those two things. So 3D printing, robotics, AI, all those sorts of things you could put together. And that's what drove this class, was a way to inspire students who would normally exclude themselves from being a tech person to becoming aware that this is out there and maybe driving their interests, but also engaging in the class. So I try to make things fun, and this is one other example of Jesse and I collaborating.
So just in kind of like a 15-second nutshell, what we're going to talk about over the course of the next hour. Essentially, I think our project really allowed us to utilize our respective strengths. So in my law practice technology class, I try to provide a really good survey of the different legal technologies out there, but admittedly, I'm not an IT professional. I've always liked technology and playing with computers. And I think, in some sense, that's one strength I can bring to talking to the students about it is I say, you don't have to be an IT person. But obviously that has some limitations as well for me that I freely admit with some of the more technical sides of the technology. So it's been great working with Stefan because he's able to really bring a lot of that in. So what we thought we would do is I would start by just telling you a little bit about my course and then about the AI components I try to teach to law students. We'll try and highlight some of the strengths and weaknesses, I think, and then I'm going to turn it over to Stefan, and he can tell you a bit about the component he did. So a little bit about my course. It's 2 credits. It's a mixture of 2Ls, 3Ls, and LLM students. The LLMs, it's really kind of hit or miss who comes. This particular spring semester, I had a lot of LLMs from China, which made for actually a really cool class because they could kind of bring in their perspective and talk about some of the legal technologies they've been involved with, especially because they're all practicing attorneys over in China. I only put in the time because it was somewhat of a tough sell to get people to come to this class during the Chicago winter from 8:25 to 10:15 on Thursday mornings. Especially for upper level students. I was concerned myself making it. I did make it to every class, but we got 20 people to take it, which I think was a pretty good testament to the interest in the subject. So kind of going off of what our keynote speaker talked about yesterday, I won't read this to you, but this is essentially my course description. And I'll give you a second just to take a look at it. So really kind of the consistent thread throughout the course is I really try and incorporate this ethical responsibility of technology competence, Model Rule 1.1, which I haven't checked lately for what the running state total count is. I think it's around 30 states have adopted it at this point. But I try to tie everything back to that point. And as you can see from the different topics I cover, I try to give a pretty good broad survey of some of the technology topics out there. This really changes with the semester. Obviously, it's kind of a moving target because I almost feel like by the end of the semester I probably could cover something different than I started with, but this is what I try and do. So my intended learning outcomes for the course, one is just really identifying the current technology trends and always kind of pointing them back towards the ethical implications, not just the duty of technology competence, but third parties. We consistently try and talk about how does that all play a role in the technologies. Kind of going off of what our speaker talked about yesterday also, I think when I first started teaching this class, I tried to be very rehearsed and kind of had it all planned out, and as time has gone on, I've gotten a little bit more comfortable. I've tried to always incorporate some sort of hands-on experience into every class. So, even if it's a matter of when we talk about cloud computing, I brought in a bunch of Google Cardboards and had people do like a virtual tour of the Google Cloud data centers, or we look over like the Dropbox terms of service, always trying to bring in something where I'm not just standing up there for an hour and a half. And then really getting them to think about how they might incorporate some of this technology into their future legal practice. I found at Northwestern it's kind of challenging because sometimes the students will say, I'm going to this big law firm, like I'm not going to have a lot of say really in what technology we use. But we try and approach it from, because you're a new attorney, they might think that you're up on this stuff. But then also just as they get into more of a position to make decisions, to kind of planted that seed where they're thinking about how they can utilize technology. So those are the goals for the class. And obviously when I'm trying to think of topics, AI is one that immediately comes to mind just because as we know, the popular press, now even legal scholarship, so much is being written about the influence of AI in law practice. So kind of from reading the news and reading the blogs and trying to keep up with this, I think I've identified some different areas that AI is really playing a role. So one is in the due diligence document analysis space, so things like mergers and acquisitions or reviewing contracts, really automating a lot of that traditional first year or associate work. Also in e-discovery with technology assisted review. A particular interest, us librarians, legal research, and then also utilizing analytics and other tools, looking at outcome prediction. So just a couple recommendations of when you're trying to think of different products or potential vendors to see if they could do a demo for the class, for example. Some of the sites I've used, one is this AngelList website, which it gives a nice directory of something like 2,200 companies listed on here. It's also kind of fun because for some of the companies, they'll list out their jobs, so I can always show these to the students and be like, if you're interested in this, this might be an angle you can go. One kind of qualification with this site is it's not super up to date, so you may find that companies no longer exist. They don't really meticulously keep the list up, but it's a good starting point. To that point, Bob Ambrogi has a really nice directory which he explained he used to use the AngelList site, and then he got frustrated that a lot of the companies didn't exist, so he created his own. So this is another great place to look, and then finally, Stanford Codex has a nice directory as well. And I should mention these, you can do searches by either type of tool or by a keyword. So if you want to just search, for example, for machine learning or artificial intelligence, you might be able to find some good examples. And then also when I'm trying to think about how I want to present this material to the students. So on the one hand, I think of those key law practice functions and think of different products in those spaces, but then also kind of breaking down the concept of AI into some of its more modular parts. This was a report written by Michael Mills, the founder of Jnana Logic, and it's a couple years old now, it's from 2016, but he did a really nice space, and he's upfront about it that someone who's super sophisticated with AI can take issue with some of these classifications, for example, like whether expert systems are truly AI. But I think for our purposes, for purposes of teaching this class, it's a nice way to present map different products to these different aspects of AI. And as we'll see, there's a lot of overlap. Projects that use machine learning might also use natural language processing, for example. So I wanted to just run through and show a couple of the different tools I have the students play with in these different areas. So machine learning, I pulled this definition from Techopedia, which has nice definitions. It's a little bit confusing, but I always kind of think of it of the concept of, you're taking data and you're trying to train a system to recognize patterns so it can implement those on later examples of the data. So one common example I mentioned is just even something as simple as Westlaw answers within Westlaw Edge. If you enter a simple search, for example, what is the statute of limitations for fraud? It'll give you those suggestions and then ask you, was that helpful? And I always point out, this is something when you're using Westlaw, you might not even really notice it, but it's an example of how they're trying to train their system on whether what it's bringing forward is a helpful result. PureSystems is another great tool. In fact, I'm going to take us to the PureSystems website. So PureSystems is a document analysis platform where essentially what you can do is import a set of documents. So these could be a whole bunch of contracts, or if you're involved in like a big merger and acquisition, importing all the documents. And then it has a bunch of filters where it recognizes certain clauses in documents. So it will pull all those clauses out of your agreement so you can review them. Essentially automating a lot of that manual grunt work that lawyers traditionally have to do. We were able to set it up where we did a webinar demo where we connected with one of their representatives. He kind of walked the students through how you use the system and then also answered any of their questions. So it wasn't as good as actually giving them a chance to play with the system, but I thought it was a nice way where they could at least see how it works in action. Something that we have access to that I show them that's kind of a similar concept is the draft analyzer in Bloomberg Law, where if you've had a chance to play with this, essentially you can upload a sample agreement and then it will compare it to, it has something like 1 million different actual agreements that have been filed, and it will compare the language in your agreement to what's market. So that's a neat way you can kind of illustrate what this process is. And then finally, I don't know if anyone has had a chance to play around with Learned Hands, but it's a neat product out of Stanford. Essentially what they've done is they're trying to build a machine learning tool for access to justice. So there's actually a thread on Reddit where people post their different legal issues. So what they've done is they've brought all these scenarios into this tool, and you go through and essentially try to identify the issues in a legal scenario. So it'll have someone's post from Reddit and it'll ask you, is this a family law issue? And you can select yes or no and advance through, and it awards you points and there's a leaderboard and all this. But what it's really trying to do is build this system so that eventually people will be able to submit their legal question and it will point them towards relevant access to justice resources. So it might be research guide, legal aid organizations. So it's a way of kind of gamifying that process that's fun, but also illustrates what you're trying to accomplish with machine learning. So natural language processing is another component, and we'll look at a few tools. Now, I think realistically, a lot of these tools utilize both machine learning and natural language processing. But I think of this as generally where software is taking something that the user submits and translating it into search results or into an input. So I think of it, for example, as just keyword searching on Westlaw or Lexis, as opposed to using Boolean searching, just really plugging in a couple keyword searches and then looking at your relevance results. And this gives me a chance to point out, if you're not familiar, essentially what she did is she ran the same search on several different legal research platforms. So Westlaw, Lexis Advanced, Fastcase, Ravel, Casetext, and Google Scholar. and found that with the same search, the search results for the top 10 cases were dramatically different. So I think that kind of highlights, just how algorithms and natural language processing come into play. Similarly, I want to show you briefly. Can we pull that file real quick? So another example we'll talk about is the Kara tool within case text, which if you're not familiar with Kara, what it allows you to do is upload some sort of legal document. It used to have some sort of citations to case law or statutes or regulations. Now all it needs is actually just some sort of factual scenario. It will analyze what you input and then recommend other resources that either weren't cited in your original document, or for the case of just keyword searching, will recommend resources it thinks are on point. So we'll do an example where I'll let you read this for just a second. It's an immigration law example. So essentially, we have this gentleman from Guatemala, and we want to look at whether he might have a legitimate asylum claim. And this is actually a research scenario in advanced legal research we used to have him do, where we had him research, because obviously there's some good statutory, regulatory, and case law material here. So just from my end, it's kind of fascinating then to be able to plug this into case text and see that you get some of the same results. So I'll show you just really quickly here how it works. So we want to upload our document, and I created a document here that just has the facts, so no citations, no legal authorities. So I'll put this down here. Upload that, and then we can put in some keywords. So let's just try something basic, like asylum. And it was in New York, so let's switch our jurisdiction over to Supreme Court, and let's do Second Circuit. Apply. And run our search. And we get results here, which, I talk with the students both in legal tech and advanced legal research and make the point of, I think it's really important to know how to do the legal research to begin with, because then you can better evaluate the results you're getting. But that being said, it is kind of incredible that constructing really good searches on Westlaw brings back a lot of these same cases. So I think it's just a good illustration of what you could do. And then just something fun I show them, I bring in Amazon Echo Dot, and we look at Alexa skills, and there's some different law firms that have created Alexa skills. This is kind of a fun one out of St. Louis, Cantor Injury Law, where You can ask Alexa, once you open the skill, you can ask Alexa, what should I do when I get in a car accident? And it will tell you, and then of course direct you, if you want to learn more, get in touch with Cantor Injury Law. But a good illustration of the natural language processing capability. And then finally, expert systems and chatbots. And again, I know for people who are really sophisticated in this space might make an argument that this isn't technically AI, but or it's a kind of a rudimentary version of AI. But I think it's a great illustration as well. I'll do things like I'll show them Jnana Logic, and if you go to Jnana Logic's YouTube channel, they have a really great app idea gallery where, if you're not familiar with Jnana, essentially it's kind of like a TurboTax for legal issues where different law firms or legal aid organizations will create these tools where maybe you're trying to determine if someone is an employee or an independent contractor, and it walks you through different questions and then gives some sort of recommendation or output. So we'll look at some of the different examples of Jnana. An open source version of the same sort of concept is Q&A markup, where you can create these basic Q&As. It has a syntax you can have the students look at, which really probably in a couple hours you can master the system. And I've had students for their final projects create Q&A interviews. I wanted to mention, obviously I show them A2J author in the class, and we have someone for Illinois Legal Aid come in and show some of the Illinois Legal Aid Online has created a bunch of different A2J guided interviews. And then we talk a bit about Joshua Browder's Do Not Pay application, which now they've turned into a really slick mobile app, which if you're not familiar, it started out as he created a tool to help people get out of parking tickets, where essentially it would just ask some basic questions and would generate a letter to contest their parking tickets. Tickets waived simply because people just didn't know how to contest them. And then just kind of to close things out, I make sure to talk to them a bit about not just the technology and application of AI, but also some of the ethical implications. You may have seen this. Essentially, Wisconsin is using an AI system to help make sentencing determinations. It's based somewhat on historical data, gauging how likely someone is to, it's looking at the recidivism rates. But in the article it talks about, the judges don't necessarily know how the system works. It's a proprietary system, so the company that developed the algorithm keeps the specific factors secret. So it obviously does bring in some ethical elements, especially considering, as we know, there might be a lot of biases built into the data it's using. And then kind of ending on a positive note, I make the point that it's kind of an open question how we're going to regulate AI, and I think these are a lot of the jobs for the students, maybe looking forward into their careers, the types of jobs they could be involved with is figuring out how do we regulate AI. So when I have to honestly assess how it went, I would probably give myself about a B. I feel like it goes well. I think I accomplished my goal of getting them aware of the tools that are out there, getting them excited about the technology and maybe thinking how they could incorporate it into their work. And also I think putting them in a position to satisfy that ethical requirement of just having technology competence. But that being said, I feel like AI, when it's all said and done to them, and to me, is still somewhat of a black box. We're not really having an opportunity to look beyond the surface at how it works. So as I was kind of lamenting that fact, Stefan and I got talking, and he had a really great idea based on his interest, going back to this map. Another element was vision under AI. So I'm going to turn it over to Stefan.
So, as I said before, I'm first and foremost a maker. I went to the Bay Area Maker Fair recently. I try to regularly do things that are interesting and different. And you'd think that if I'm doing a class on AI, that I'm some sort of an AI expert, or maybe have a degree in artificial intelligence, but that's not the case. I'm basically just leveraging what I know to learn more. So to start the process, I want to know what the students want. I always try to do a learner analysis. I follow the Dick and Carey model when I create classes. And we want the information to be relevant to them. What do you want to know? What do you want to get out of this when you're done? There's nothing worse than looking at a description of a class and then sitting down and realizing this is not at all what I thought this would be. This is not relevant to me or my life or what I really would be excited about. So we did a survey to find these things. Oops, back up one. There. So we wanted to get an idea of where they're coming from. Knowledge of AI systems. So 55.6% only have a general knowledge of AI. In the green area, there was they've indirectly worked with AI, but the blue area is I have no knowledge. So grid and a lion's share of this part of the survey shows that they really have no experience. That it's sort of like you were saying, a black box to them. Programming experience. The 11% represents 1% of the respondents. No experience with programming languages. These are folks who are like, I'm not technical. I wouldn't really think I would ever try a programming language. And part of the Google Vision Kit that I worked with, there is some programming involved, and so where you don't really benefit from learning a specific technology at a specific time, but you really want to learn how to learn and how to be logical and create things. Again, electronics experience. Almost 90% have only 1% has any electronics experience. So with the kit, there's the little components, electronics, there's a little board. There's some, it's plug and play for the most part, but it's something that they can get their hands on. So we were like, what would you like to see? You got one person at the very top, I only want to see the presentation. Just talk to me, and that's it. I might not even pay attention. And then, overwhelmingly, they want demos and hands-on. I want to play with it, I want to touch it, I want to work with it. So that's where we went. Try to get across to the students is maker skills. Things like curiosity. If you look at something, you want to know how it works. You want to know how to build it. You look at an idea and you're like, how can I apply that to something else? And in the law, you're finding things like how it helps somebody. You want to be able to have that curiosity and creativity to apply something that didn't directly affect that, but we can use it in what we need to do here. Hypotheses. When you let me catch up with my notes here. You want to be able to use your critical thinking to create a hypothesis of how you think it's going to work. You not necessarily going into this building the final version. The first thing you build is version 1.0. Failure is actually a beneficial part of this and an essential part of this whole process. Inquiry skills. You want to be able to find relevant, evidence-based information to support what you're talking about. You know, it's not like my opinion is, well, I think in this sort of thing, I don't think that would ever happen. But if you don't have relevant, objective knowledge to back that up, then you might be taking your group on a tangent that's like not the way to go. Having an open mind, not thinking I know what I'm doing. I think you guys are all wrong, and I'm not going to budge. But having an open mind to hear somebody's argument, hear what their data to back it up, and you know what? Let's try it out. We can see if it works or not, because failure is part of this process. If it fails, maybe we learn something, and that's generally how, when you're solving a problem at the beginning, you poke a few things and see what works, fail. Oh, and even if it failed, it may give you a piece of information that you could use to build on that. So as you go through a problem that you had no idea how to solve, halfway through the process, and a few failures and some learning, you've actually got a foundation under you, and that you can now reevaluate. I think we're on the road to solving this problem. Of course, applying the knowledge and skills that you get, and then higher order thinking. Intentionally using skills like synthesis and inference to tackle a problem. And then iteration, many failed attempts to get that final solution, and part of the process is when you come up with a plan at the beginning, it may not be exactly that at the end. Oftentimes it's better. You find things that you didn't think of at the beginning as you go through, and with new knowledge, you are better able to come up with with more ideas and better solutions. So we worked with the students and showed them like what we're working with. And you can see the scale, this is really small. It's 1 inch by about, 1.5 by about 3 inches. This is, all the computing happens on this board. It's a little Raspberry Pi, and there's no cloud behind it. There's no like big mainframe or anything that's generating, it's all happening local. And then we have a little camera. Again, it's about 1.5 inches square. Initially, when I did this project, whoops, let me get behind. We got a cat picture. It all fits into this little like box when you're done, and you got the camera in the front. This one is the joy detector, and we'll get that in a minute. But that's really what it's all encompassed in this little box right here. So when you have an AI system, if you are not engaged in this process, and every law firm buys the same AI system, everybody's AI system's trained with the same data, you're not necessarily having a competitive advantage. You're not falling behind, but this guy's gonna keep detecting faces. But you're just staying at water level. You're not moving ahead. So you want to be able to and leverage viewer data. So the problem that we presented, this gentleman had a cat, and as cats do, they get on the counters and they knock things off. So he's got a very guilty expression. I love this picture. So we want to use this kit right here to detect whether he is on the counter or not. So if we go to the Oxford database, we see a bunch of examples of a cat. And of course, in the situation we're talking about, it's not going to be a cat on a white background that's well lit. These are all, so this data may not be ideal for our need. And in fact, this is what we're dealing with. So very busy background. The AI doesn't have context. It's just finding patterns. And in this case, that little rectangle is a box of markers. And it's 57% sure, roughly, that that's a human being right there. The model that we're using in this case is the cat-dog human detector. It's a built-in demo app that's at all. So what he ended up doing was getting his own data. So he set up a motion detector with the camera, and every time it detected motion, it would snap a picture in this location. And so he had a lot of examples of what the cat looked like. And the example that he was doing, he set it up too fast, so you got a lot of duplicates. But once you are done, you have to catalog all the data to identify what it is that it's seeing, so that it can use that to check for patterns. And then the results of that were, in a very, very low-lit situation, it found the cat right on the counter. So, being able to take a system and not being revolutionizing it, but to customize it enough that it applies and you get very good results versus what you could have ended up with. And like Jesse was saying, that AI doesn't give you an answer. It doesn't say this is the answer. It never gives you the answer. It's a percentage of its probability that this is the answer. And then he mentioned also biases. Bias, then that bias is going to come through in the data. And so there are some of these things that are still need to be worked out, but that's what we're looking at here. So the Google AI is what we're working with. Did 3 projects. This is the first one. It's the joy detector. Blue light indicates that it has acquired a face. And then see, as it goes yellow, it says that he's got a lot of joy. If I take a picture, there you go. It will give him a joy score, so it stores it locally. So we can do that again. You can publish that later if you guys want to. Jesse signs off. Then I have the object detector. It's another model that you just upload to the system, and it's got a database built in of all these hundreds of thousands of objects this guy keeps detecting. and it can tell you and it's funny to watch it go through its probabilities of what it thinks it is between marker, lipstick, pencil, car, human, and so it just runs through all these probabilities until it gives you an answer. The last one was the idea of hacking something to your own use, using what we have here and leveraging that. So the idea of this case, is that we're using the face detection and the face tracking. So like any of those like digital cameras that you have, when it says a little bounding box on the face, it sees where the face is, and then it decides is it center, left of center, or right of center. If it's left of center, then it uses the motor to turn to the face. If it's right of center, it turns the other way. So that was the idea behind this guy. This is about as big as he was. Camera's in his eye. You can't tell there, but if you guys want to come up later, you can take a look. The hardware doesn't quite fit in this, so there were several iterations of whether it's on the box, but then I decided it would be cool would be to 3D print a tree stump so that you can put them up on top, and then wiring can come out and plug it in, and it's a nice little natural looking thing. And you can also take a look, here's some wiring and then the motor that drives it, so it gives you an idea of all these things are accessible. You can buy them online very easily. There's a lot of learning guides now. It's never been a better time to be a maker and to be able to think of an idea and find the learning resources and the people. The Maker Faire is all about building something and sharing with others, and that's coming through online as well. That there are so many people out there that want to help you, and there's also lots of people who want to help others. And a lot of times the maker community is that somebody helps a family member with a disability or something like that, creates something, puts it online, someone else finds that, improves it, shares it, and everybody benefits. So that's really kind of where I'm coming from and where I'm all about. Like I said, I was at Maker Faire, and I live stream from there. I try to build communities, maker-style communities and learning education. And so I started a Maker and Geek. It's like .com and on YouTube and Instagram. So if you follow me there and see what I'm up to. I've sort of started now that I'm graduated, and I'm trying to just kind of like take what I'm passionate about and move it forward and share with everyone. This gives you an idea. So this is the same concept of what I said here with the face tracking. Bounding box finds a face and decides where it's at. This is a slightly different application of that. Let me kind of see how it works. So we've got the little robot car here. It's got the Google Vision Kit on. Yeah, it's all happening on board. It's using the face detection to say is it right of center, left of center, and it's also periodically moving a few feet, rechecking, adjusting, moving, rechecking, adjusting, and it's using that motor technology to rotate the car rather than like I was doing, rotating the head and the camera. So again, same concept, same hardware, same software, and imagination, and in this case, fun. And that's, you know, we saw in the keynote earlier, we're taking the fun out of education and we need to put it back in, and that's what I'm intending to do with this project. Next. So we designed the class, they don't want lecture, they want it hands-on. So started with a little bit about it, showed them what the hardware was, and then gave them all kits and instructions, and kind of grouped them up, and let them build. They've never touched it before. They've maybe would be reticent to touch it, but now you're here. This is an opportunity that you wouldn't ordinarily have, and this is what we want to give them. I initially wanted to do demos, like do a demo of this one, do a demo of this one, and then a build area, and have them kind of rotate around. And being experimental like this is, it didn't quite function 100% of the time. So, wanting to be in a class where you know you can count on the equipment to run, and so I discarded that plan and went to plan B, which was like, if they want to come here to build, they don't need to sit and watch this demo, let's let them build. So it was funny because everybody's busy working away, class was done, Jesse was like, okay, let's go. All right guys, shut the lights off when you're done. And they're like in there just going like, and they actually, after class, a bunch of them finished them up. So, it's like engaging in something and being excited about it. So we wanted to find out, do like a full circle, find out what they thought of it, what they came out of it, were we successful? So, launch forward here, let's see. Oops. Sorry about the delay. Okay, previous, okay. So, how did you feel about the hands-on approach? We have got about 3 responses for each of these sections. The first one is, someone responded, the hands-on approach helped cement my understanding of AI. Taking something physical, I'm rooted in constructivism, that people who do things and they construct knowledge, and working with this, instead of being a black box, people are like, oh, I can see how this functions. It's not this mysterious box anymore, and it is something that I can work with. The other comment was, the hands-on approach let me explore an AI device and let me build it. It was extremely rewarding. And so that was inspiring, that people really found that it helped them, and they were excited about it, and it's not something that they even thought was something they could do. And thirdly, by using the hands-on approach, I find that AI is accessible and not far from our life. So that's really the awareness, and that this is here, and then there's more beyond that. So wanting to inspire people to take this, and this needs to go beyond the classroom. When they were done with the project, they keep the kits, and they work with them, and hopefully inspire them to move on and go forward. And so that's, I don't want things to end when the classroom time is over. It has to go beyond that, and hopefully affect the world. Did your attitude change? The first respondent, I think it changed for the better because I was able to successfully build an AI device. So they feel that sense of accomplishment. Another one, before the AI workshop, I felt like I did not know much about AI. So I felt neutral about it. However, after touching and seeing an AI device, my attitude changed for the better. Now I am eager to explore more AI devices. It's really nice that they're moving on and taking this further. Last one on this one, I think hands-on approach is very interesting and helped me get engaged with AI. After class, I looked for more related papers because it raised my interest. So hopefully we're developing people who are explorers and curiosity is taking root. And would this be useful in your law curriculum as a whole? The first response, yes, I love the hands-on approach, and I think it would be beneficial in a variety of contexts. Another one, I want to have this hands-on approach in my law curriculum because it's interesting and useful. It will be more efficient if we study with interest. So that's pretty cool. It's kind of a basic thing, but being engaged and excited about what you're learning about, again, rooted in what I like to do, finding people's passions and assigning them work to say, show me the learning, but don't necessarily have to show me the learning in the way I specify. Everybody has to do a paper. Maybe not everybody likes to do papers. They're not exactly. Make a video. You can make a project of some other sort. As long as you can show me the learning, show me that you understand the topic, and talk about the process itself is learning. So why did you make the decisions you made? How creative were you when you ran across a problem? And how resilient were you when you ran across that? And how did you keep moving? and how did this show what we're working on here? Finally, the practice is a much better way for students to learn than merely listening to professors. Trying to flip that, this is what they wanted. I didn't design a class and say, here's what I think you need. What do you think? It's, we've worked together on this and created something that will hopefully have a lasting effect. And yes, questions?
You mentioned if every law firm built the same AI and had, what were the various, the variations that the students came up with in using this kit? Were there tie-ins to maybe functions of legal services that you were able to think of in how you would use that particular kit there?
In this case, that was sort of beyond the scope of what we were accomplishing.
Right. Just the instruments actually, yeah.
Yeah, so, and this is something we're iterating on. It's like our first go-through on this. So we wanted to inspire them to get hands-on with it. I think what we want to do going forward is maybe do this multi-day and then incorporate more complex things. Build on that, and then exactly, yeah, I really love that comment. Yeah, so that's exactly where we're going with this, is like to expand it. Now that we know this at a basic level, this is something that they're excited about, and this is something they want to do, we can tie it in, make it longer, and give them more time to develop it further.
It'd be funny if the car rolled up to the face and then said, "Do you have a legal question?"
Do you have any questions? Yes. That is like through curiosity. You can have multiple things do things in a way that, like, you can have a location sensor that, like, as you walk up to it, it sees, and then it can check your face and, like,
You look sad. Did you
you're
have
sad,
a legal problem?
and a lot of these privacy issues that come along, like, you don't normally think of AI and facial recognition, but I don't know if everybody remembers the Facebook 10-year challenge. Give us a picture here, another picture 10 years later. What better way than to have somebody cataloging millions of pictures of people 10 years, the same person 10 years apart? You can't buy something like that.
Wow.
And so where Google's or Facebook's like, well, we didn't make it a viral thing, it was just something we did. There's no hard evidence that this is something that they were using in that way. But there's something like your profile picture. You really can't even think, oh, maybe it's your profile picture. You can do the same sort of thing, but not everybody uses their picture. Sometimes it's a cartoon. Sometimes it's a picture from this time period or that time period. So, that's the big part of, like, when he did the shooting of the pictures. You got to catalog that. This is the outline of this cat in this picture. This is, so that it can, without the cataloging, it's really unable to, learn with the method we're using here. Any other questions? Yes.
Are there, you mentioned programming languages. Are there any primary programming languages that are being used to implement AI?
Python.
Python?
Yeah. Python is huge. It's fairly easy to use and learn. Microsoft has another, if you don't want to actually deal with the code, which is another project that I was working on, Microsoft has what they call make code. And it's Python on the back end, but it's drag and drop. So you're like, when the audio sensor gets sound, I want it to turn a light on, and I want the color to be red. And then, so you're just dragging these blocks, and then it repeats. And so you can even get kids involved. But then if you're only really in the project I was doing, I really just wanted to get across programming concepts and have people to understand what's a loop, what's a if then or else. Well, how would you do things? And so you can kind of get beyond the syntax a little bit and get to the idea of troubleshooting things and using the concepts. Yes?
Was this part of the legal technology course? This
Yes.
activity? Yes. Can you tell us how you tied it into learning outcomes for this activity in particular?
In this activity, the learning, the objective was an attitude change to engage with AI. And so where Jesse's overall objective is to get them aware of it, the further objective for that I was doing here was to get, not only be aware but engage with it, so that when you get to a law firm, that you're more likely to say, I'm not afraid of this stuff. Like, I can do this and help out in this area. And as you're saying once, the bar is kind of low to saying, okay, now you're the company expert, run with this. If we break down that barrier where people kind of self-exclude themselves from technology and just decide they don't understand it, and show how fun it can be and how accessible it is, then we can hopefully make people engage more. Anyone else? Awesome. Well, you guys have been awesome, great, we love it. We're glad to be here. And if you guys have any more questions, we've got stuff up here if you want to take a look at some of the hardware. We appreciate your time. Thank you. Great, thank you, appreciate it, thank you very much. Yes. AIY, so it's like TIY with AI. And so, it uses the light to say it's detecting somebody, and then when it turns yellow, it's like, oh, that's joy. There's, just blue and yellow. It gives you a low score. Yeah, so how much joy? 0 to 100. Yeah, it's your facial features decide based on what it knows, and then it can generate a picture, and then just your joy score on there. And
So on the back end, you plug this in, read that data, or is it feeding it to them already?
It's all happening locally, so we can either plug it directly in, it's got a video feed to it, or if it's just on the network, then you can use the terminal secure socket into it and bring up this Linux, basically. Yep. That's really cool. Yeah, and then this is where you can see a little camera. And then it has the operating piece of it. When it finds it, it's able to move. So I just around the house, I'm like, what do I need to use something? And I'm like, oh, there's a night timer. This would be perfect. It's an owl, turns to bed, and then it just kind of evolved. And so that's when I brought this in, because I'm like, well, the board is just a little bit higher than this is. And so, but learning, it's like teaching people, but it's inspiring you to learn more about it. So you become more
And then you said sometimes failure is like, that's just gonna help. It's better than
it's always
it's just they work, but so don't let, it's like paralysis by analysis. If you feel like you need to get it perfect, and you never get it started, then, it's the whole entrepreneurial spirit. Fail fast, learn a lot, get something out there, while company B is now analyzing. You're already about to
you're on 2.0 or
3.0 by now.
How did you have, I was looking up the prices for the Vision Kit and the Voice Kit. So I see the Vision Kit's about $90, the Voice Kit's about $50. How did you guys fund that? Did you have the students pay for that as a textbook, or did you?
In this case, it was a school project that I was working on, so I funded it personally.
Oh my word, okay, all right.
Okay, so,
sure.
So you believe that
phase.
So, where's the Raspberry? You're not using
It's in here.
if you don't have
There's
that,
no supply there.
Yeah, all of it is in here. The only reason it's plugged in is because it has power.
Okay.
in that fact pattern, it seems like.
And so the camera, the privacy light, the button, there's a Raspberry Pi about this big, and then
I'll just
the
find your Raspberry Pi.
Well, I was gonna say, which Raspberry Pi? That must not be a 3, it's a 0,
It's a
right,
Okay, I
okay.
didn't know about zero, so behind the price.
Yeah,
And I
it's
think
a
that's
0.
what's
So the light
Integration
changes color depending on how much joy it's detecting.
There's a set of.
That's now it's very yellow, and now it's very blue. Yeah.
related facts.
Okay, so it's a text.
So it's how many
Yeah, it's the
How many
facial
teeth
expression
it's detecting,
decides,
think about it.
you know,
Okay.
Yeah,
And
it's like you're
yellow.
very, you're so sad right now. You're so sad. Oh,
Oh, so you were just told to be sad. The model is
So-
training
I can't
you,
fake
it's
joy.
training you.
I can
It
fake your sadness, but I cannot fake.
so it'll take a picture, if you push the button, it takes a picture, and then it gives you a choice
Or for
score.
example,
We did that for the students, like, took a few pictures of people and they tried to figure out what their choice score
creates
was.
that initial body. and then-
So camera here,
But
and then
I
the
always.
step motor here,
But you're
and then
relying
this
on
in,
the
so
thing behind
you can
it.
see the
Behind the curtain.
camera behind there.
I mean,
What
So the step
university
motor
gave you?
And
plugs
that's
into
what
this,
I always explain.
and this
to
plugs
people.
into the Raspberry Pi.
These
So we've got
tools,
data,
It's
Right.
surround and
there's a
power.
risk in that.
And so
if-
based on
and
where
students don't learn how to
detects the face to the center, it's gonna stay there, because if it's to the left
You
of
know,
center,
as opposed
it'll
to
start
learning
moving
how to
this way.
issue
And
spot,
so the right of center, it'll
you
start
know,
moving that way.
craft and,
Okay.
craft
And,
search straight,
so
you know, I mean, I
the
think
board and everything would
I
go
always
over
tell
here,
them, I think it's
because
something
it just doesn't fit in this
you're
little guy.
better
I was like hoping it would be like one little compact thing, but it's just, this little, it's about 3 inches, and this little, it's a little taller than this guy. But,
What
you know,
is the
just
prize you're
hot
at?
super glue and,
It's like, that's the holy grail.
stepper motor and
What's your
the
target?
kit itself.
What's your
I
target?
My
had-
children never find
And-
this.
If you
We should-
don't think about it,
I already, they already
you can
said
start
the
getting
Minecraft were on low, it wasn't powerful enough, so that's what
Yeah.
we told them.
You don't even know
Another whole
because you don't
single
know
board
about
computer
that you're on the wrong
sort
street,
of
let alone the wrong
manufacturer to
branch.
look at is if you get beyond
so-
what you can do with a Pi.
Yeah,
Is
At some
Odroid.
point,
Odroid is
you
making,
gotta
yeah, Odroid is
be
making
thinking about-
awesome, very
I would say
fast,
it's up
ARM-based single board
What is it?
computers.
Are they cheap and can they run
They're
Minecraft?
cheap. I don't know if they can run Minecraft. I use it
Clearly
for,
what the target is.
I use it
No idea.
for something called I use it for something called Nextcloud that's like Dropbox but open.
It's a
And I've been really, I have a Raspberry Pi 3, but I've been really psyched about the Odroids. They're just super powerful and about
Seems to be-
$60.
I don't
They're
have to know that it's
comparable. I mean, you know, these
major
are
branch.
cell phone processors, it's octa-core Snapdragon.
Then.
So they're just whatever's in your
I
phone.
didn't pretend to know what those
That's
were.
like-
Optical
it's kind of a
Snapdragon.
fun
Raspberry Pi
way to
thing up.
present it.
We should still be doing that podcast together. We could talk about this.
Yes, exactly, which is good. We started that podcast all those years ago.
Just
We
rely
ran out
on
of
the
time.
Well, yeah, that's the problem.
What was the other manufacturer you mentioned?
Odroid, Odroid, Odroid,
Yeah.
and
Whereas
For this one, I
A, know how to do-
I mean, I love my Raspberry Pi, and I love the Raspberry Pi ecosystem and all of that. I just had tried sort of like, you know, trying to set up the Minecraft server. I mean, I was trying to set up a server on my Raspberry Pi, and I just got super
We had
frustrated.
groups with
Right. They were able to set it up, but it's just slow to load.
Exactly, that's
So,
the same thing with
and then
me.
that's when they grabbed like.
So one person.
2012 back.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
2012 back, and
Everybody-
it's big changes we're gonna have going on. It's just like the start of the Minecraft server, which people in here all the time.
Yeah, online,
They're
step
working on
by
stuff
step.
with Minecraft. Right.
Well,
What do you think you want me to do with Minecraft?
Nice.
They are arguing about like taxes versus like.
Oh, you're
printing more
raising
money.
that kid right.
Wow.
Good for you.
It's not just him, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're doing, is they're sitting there and they're having these arguments like all the time. This is the child.
A little Model UN situation.
And then the system
My,
is developed.
we are secular Jews, so it's like doing things in synagogue, we do things in secular Jewish groups. They don't do bar or boston
Generate our
we do
universe.
B'nai
And that
mitzvahs.
universe.
Yeah.
So part of the B'nai mitzvah was this, I believe. Other kids, I believe in apology, I believe
Just
in
like
I believe in arguments.
Not my child. I don't know.
We're
yet.
raising a little lawyer, tiny little lawyer. The apple does not fall far from the tree.
So you're not getting bored when you're programming, it's dyslexic, there's such a,
Boolean,
there's out there.
Yeah.
Of course there are.
It just has this such a spirit